So we were talking about George Sudbury Humphreys. Joined the church. Well, he was born in Nottingham,
Nottingham,
England.
yeah. Nottinghamshire, England.
How did the missionaries find him? Do you know?
I don't know the story of the missionaries finding the family. I don't think I've ever found anything or read anything about it.
But Sarah Ann Eaton, also from very close. She's from Mansfield, Nottingham, England.
Yes, yes.
Were they married when they joined the church?
No, they're, George came with his family in 1856 to Utah. He was only 11 years old at the time. No, in 1856.
He was born in 45.
14. She was born in 45.
Oh, yeah, and he was born in 42.
Yeah, so he was 14 by the time they got to Utah. And he kicked around at various jobs, but he became an out-and-back teamster in 1861 or 2. And
They were the Teamsters hired, well, they gave them tithing credit or whatever else, but they would go out and bring...
They would drive the teams that brought the new immigrants to Utah. And it was very efficient. They cut off a whole month off the typical time that would be the case if they had to have the immigrants themselves learn how to drive teams and learn how to survive on the trail.
Well, not only that, these young out-and-back drivers got the first chance at the cutest girls coming over.
They did, and that's what happened with George.
That's where he met her?
Yeah. He saw her mother, and he recognized the mother. He would probably not recognize the daughter because she was really young when he left. So, and he said, this was written afterward, but he said, she saw me and she ran up and gave me the biggest bear hug, and she wouldn't let go. And he said, that was okay, but I'd have sure liked it better if it had been her daughter. So yeah, they got married not too long after they got to Utah. And there's some controversy amongst the family historians about where they got married. Some claim that it was in Bear Lake, but it was not. And we have George's own word for it, that he married her before they went to Bear Lake. I don't know where they got that, but anyway, that's not true. But it definitely was not in the temple because they weren't sealed until 1869, which is about 5 years later. So, and that's another really interesting story. If I get it right, they had 2 sons by that time, and so they went to the Logan Temple, and they were sealed as a family.
Now wait, was it a Logan Temple in 1869?
Oh no, it was the endowment house.
Okay.
Sorry, the endowment house. Yeah, the endowment house. And the very next sealing that followed them in the records was the family of George Stratford.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was by design, and I'm trying to remember the relationship now. But I think, yes, the relationship was that
That's Jesse George Stratford. Vera's father.
He was sealed to his parents.
Okay, at that time.
Yeah, with the rest of the family. Yes. Yeah.
See, that is a
And let,
interesting thing.
there was a relationship, and I can't remember what it was. It had something to do with Zilla Wayne, though. She was Sarah Ann's mother, the bear hugger. Anyway, the Stratfords had some relationship there in Bear Lake, and so that I'm sure that was not coincidence that they just showed up at the temple, that they were together. And if we got the book, I could look that up because I talk about that in the book.
Oh, okay.
I think I could remember the relationship.
Interesting. Well, okay. Just moving over to talk about the Stratfords now a little bit. The first member of that Stratford family to join the church must have been George Stratford.
Actually, it wasn't. The first one to join the church was George's mother.
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Cass. C-A-S-S.
No. Eliza Barwell.
Oh.
That she was the first one to join the church, and then some of the children, and Edwin, our ancestor, was one of the first ones too. Well, let's look and see. Here's Eliza Barwell. It doesn't give a baptism date in this place. Anyway, Edwin was one of the first of the family to join the church too. And there's a story kind of about that. This young missionary that came from London to Essex came with a companion. The companion lasted about a day and headed back home. And this missionary stayed and was determined to see it through. And he's the one that I think that the Stratford family was probably the first family in Malden, Essex, to join the church. And the young missionary wound up marrying one of the daughters, Lucetta Stratford, Edwin's younger sister.
Well, that encourages the staying power a little bit if you
Yeah.
have the
Yeah,
attractive
he did
daughters.
that was, but he did it right. He went home from his mission and immediately turned around and came back to Malton.
And what was George Stratford's profession there in Essex?
George Stratford, I believe, followed his father's profession of a gardener, landscaper kind of a guy. And that's kind of a rags to riches story because they were relatively well to do. And George's father, Samuel, was born in abject poverty. And it was Samuel who by industry and talent, I suppose, developed, I think, the gardening and landscaping business that his son followed in.
And they would have served the gentry
Yeah.
class of people there, right?
Yeah. Anyway, that family all immigrated together, and they had the wherewithal to buy wagons when they got to the U.S. in Iowa City.
But it looks like he died in Nebraska, Florence, Nebraska, in 1861.
He did.
George.
Yeah, he did. And nobody's ever been able to find his grave. And unfortunately, I inquired when we were there at the visitor center on our quarters, and I said, well, whatever he is, great-great-grandfather died at winter quarters. Why doesn't he at least have his name on the list? It turns out that the only ones they really pay attention to are the early ones that left winter quarters within a couple of years of the first migration. So to qualify to be as one of those groups at winter quarters, you had to have died in the first few years. And 1861 didn't qualify.
That's quite a ways later.
And George, it's interesting because George got the cholera. You know, cholera can come overnight, and people will get it and die within 24 hours. It is really lethal, and that happened to him.
And that was a real hotbed for cholera, wasn't it? That
Oh yeah,
winter quarters area?
yeah, poor sanitation, humid. Yeah, it happened probably regularly, and that was within just a few days of the family leaving winter quarters to head to Utah.
Mm. So she continued on with the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Did she ever remarry?
No.
So she lived another 32 years.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, she lived. And that story is repeated fairly frequently. Let's see, going back, yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Edwin's sister Lucetta and her husband. Her husband was named Charles Penrose. You ever heard that name?
Yes, I have.
Okay. The most recent mention of his name was by President Hinckley, who told the story of that family getting on the boat to travel to the States.
Talking about the Penrose family?
Yeah. Charles and his wife Lucetta Stratford. And he, as I mentioned, the whole family got together and migrated together. And anyway, Charles had wealthy parents. And fortunately, they didn't disown him for joining the church, although I'm sure they thought of it. And Charles was very prominent in the church. He had talent.
What was he an early apostle?
He was a little later.
Oh, in the first presidency.
Yeah, he was a little later apostle. Yeah, and he was in the first presidency. In fact, he was scheduled to marry Dad and Mother, and he decided to go to the great beyond about a week before.
Oh.
That really disappointed Mother.
So that would have been her grandmother's sister's husband. It was Mariana Crabb's wife that married Penrose.
It was
Or
Edwin married Mariana, and Edwin's sister.
Oh, it was Edwin's sister.
Edwin's sister Lucetta married.
So Vera's grandfather's sister's husband.
And the Charles and Lucetta, you got to be sitting down when I tell you this, had 18 children.
In that union, 18 children?
18 children.
Did they all live past infancy?
Less than half.
Less than half survived.
Less than half. Only 7 survived to the age of 8. And they lost. Oh, and there was another member of the family. I believe it was Julia, another younger sister. And she married a guy named Henry Rampton. But she was pregnant as they came across, and the baby and she both died. But Henry went on to marry, I don't know if he became a polygamist or not, but he married again. And his probably his grandson or great grandson, probably his grandson, was the governor of Utah.
Calvin Repton.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well,
it was quite a family.
Right, you're touching on fame.
Yeah, yeah, that was. They were really quite a family. Let's
Yeah.
see what else. Oh, the story. I need to tell the story that President Hinckley told in conference.
Oh, okay.
Charles had money, and he was also in a prominent branch position, and he brought, I guess, an inordinate amount of furniture and stuff on the boat, and so the rumors and the gossip started spreading that he had kind of built the church to get all this stuff, and he was unhappy, to say the least,
At those rumors.
at those rumors. Yeah, he actually he was furious, and so to keep from creating a bad scene, he locked himself into his quarters on the boat and wrote a hymn. He wrote several hymns. This one was "School Life Feelings." Oh, my brother! And if you understand the background, you read the words of that hymn, you really get a feeling for the kind of guy.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
He was really writing about himself.
he was.
That was heartfelt.
Yeah, it was. And he wrote another hymn. You're familiar with "O Ye Mountains High"? Describes to a T the kind of mountain valleys that were in the West. He wrote that hymn before he ever left England.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when you read the words to that hymn, you say, boy, this guy really had a vision, and he was a very gifted writer, and the church sent him back to be the European mission president a couple of times. And he had a pen that would just take apart the anti-Mormons arguments.
What was his profession?
Well, a writer,
He was a writer.
and a newspaper guy. Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, Edwin was a talented guy. He was something to do with this education in the state of Utah.
He was your great-grandfather.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and but you do remember Jesse Stratford, you said.
Yeah,
Died in 1951.
yeah. Very infrequently we'd go to visit him
In Pocatello?
in Pocatello. And all I ever saw, he was always sitting in that chair across the room from us. It was a fairly small living room, but to a young kid, in your mind, it's a much larger room.
Are you talking Jesse George? Or
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
not his son Jesse.
No.
You remember Jesse,
No, I don't.
your grandfather?
Oh, yeah, I remember a little bit about my grandfather. Not a lot. I remember on my way, Dad took me to the mission home in Salt Lake. When I went on a mission, we went via Pocatello, so that we spent overnight with him, yeah. And that was probably the best acquaintance I had with him. When we go to visit down to Pocatello and whatnot, we'd spend a little time with him, but I didn't really know that much about it.
I see he died when I was 12 or 13, so I never really had.
And it was his letter that we were looking at a minute ago, where he had written to Vera
Yeah.
just before he died,
Yeah.
complaining of being so dizzy.
Yeah. So dizzy and can't read very well. Can't hear very well. Where have we heard that before?
You know, they didn't do anything for cataracts back
Oh,
then,
no.
did they?
No, they couldn't. In fact, the first person that I ever heard anything about that had cataracts was David O. McKay. And you remember, well, maybe you wouldn't, but I remember when he'd sit in conference as he got a little older, and he had these Coke bottle glasses, huge things, and it just distorted his whole face. But even with those, I mean, they've cut out the lens in your eye, and you have to have a horrific hunk of glasses out that far.
There was nothing to insert in there.
No, there was nothing.
I could just take the cloudy lens out.
Yeah. And so he was practically blind for years before he died.
No, I can just remember them. There was like two counselors that would hold him up in his 90s when he would address the St. Sac conference.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of Grandpa Stratford again, why? I remember when we moved to Thane, we didn't have anything as a family, and so he gave Mother and Dad an old Chevrolet truck, which they used after they come to Thane, and then when they purchased a car, why they took and cut down this truck and made a tractor out of it. Moved the rear wheels forward, took the cab off from it, and so the darn thing was not that long, maybe 6 feet long, 5, 6 feet long, and then we would take and hook that to the hay rake and rake up the hay. Use that to pull the mower, the horse mower.
Interesting. I've
You
never.
don't remember that?
No, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, and in fact, we would hook two mowers together, two horse mowers, one on either side, and I would ride the mower, and Alan, would ride the other one, so that it was over rocky ground, and you had to be careful you didn't run the blade into the rock. So
And your dad would drive the car?
and Dad would drive the truck, and so then we would raise the blade when we come upon a mound or something, and I hated that job, but we did that, and that way we were able to cut between the two of them would be
Oh yeah, you could
about a
really.
12-foot swath.
Yeah, you could really move around the field.
And so, and then I remember that on Sundays, we had a group of us that kind of chummed together. It was Lloyd and Boyd and Al and I, Kay Halliday, and we would sometimes take that truck out and run it all over the place, run up the canyons, and we do that on Sunday afternoons after church was out, and had a whale of a time with it. So that was an all-around utility truck.
That was
for
the
us.
one that was given to your folks
Yeah, that was the one that was given
by
to
Jesse.
us. And then I remember that we used to have to put our food in a creek that was running outside of the house to keep it cold. We'd take the milk and
So when you were living in
have a
Thane.
box and put it in the creek. Yeah, when we were living in Thane, put it in there. And
This was before you moved to the ranch?
that was at the ranch.
That was at the ranch.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
at the
right.
ranch.
Did you have electricity at the ranch?
And, well, that came in 1938, electricity at the ranch, yeah. And yeah, we were doing that at that time. And then, I don't remember when it was sometime, I guess just before the war or something, that Grandpa gave the family a hot point refrigerator.
I remember the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Was that Grandpa
That
Stratford?
was Grandpa Stratford. And boy, that was the best thing. We'd freeze our own ice cream, and we'd have the thing take care of the milk and other things. So he was, and he gave Grandma other things too. I don't remember all of them, but items of furniture.
Well, that was a pretty large family he had.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
What
yeah.
was he a farmer?
No. He was in the furniture business. Had apparently a pretty successful furniture store
In Pocatello.
in Pocatello, Stratford's Furniture, and he was quite successful with it.
He and Ray, his son, run it together, and it was a pretty successful business.
So,
And most of, I think all of the sons had college educations, and Mother was really put out that none of the girls got the opportunity. But the budget only went so far, and they just figured that the girls would get married, and that would be their career, and it was the boys who had to have some means to support a family. So that was the rationale. But Mother was really disappointed because she had a good mind,
and given the opportunity,
she would she would have.
So where did she fit in that family? What, was she the younger side?
She was on the younger side. She had two younger siblings. Dick, who was 3 years. No, let's see, when was Dick born? No, Dick was born in 1907, I think, and Reba was born in 1910. So there were at least those two that were younger than Mother. I think that's the way it was.
So
That would still be quite a large gap between Mother and Dick. So maybe there was somebody else in there. I don't remember.
how old was she when she got polio?
Clyde might have been
About
younger,
5.
She was about 5 at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And what did she remember of that experience? What did she talk about?
She remembers being carried by her parents when they lived in Logan. Mother was born in Ogden. The family moved to Logan somewhere in that time period. And here's the relationship back to the Humphreys family. They would carry her up to the Logan Temple for a blessing by the temple president, whose name was William Budge. William Budge had been a state president in Bear Lake. And Zilla Eaton, mother of Sarah Ann, our bear hugger, came to Utah unsealed because she left her husband back in England, and she was sealed to William Budge, who was the state president, and he'd been told by the brethren, says, you go back to your state and find all the single sisters that aren't sealed and get them sealed up.
So let's see. So they just took her there for that blessing when she first got polio.
Yeah, they would take her there frequently for blessings, and they attribute that to the fact that Mother had she recovered, and that was rare. Most people who contracted polio at a young age, as she had, spent what life they had in an iron lung. because it paralyzed their lung functions, and they put them in this big barrels. You know. And,
Did he actually marry her then? He'd have to have done it to a seal tour.
no, he didn't. No, that was just.
Did they seal without a marriage?
Oh yeah, they did that all the time. Brigham Young had an older sister who, this is a story that's told by Bushman in Rough Stone Road, that came to Nauvoo, and she'd had an abusive husband, and any talk of marriage just got her really irate when she says, "I will never marry a man." And Joseph was shocked and said, "Oh, but you know, you're giving up tremendous opportunities in the next life." And he just flat out asked her, "Would you be sealed to me?" And she said, "Well, I guess." So they sealed her up to Joseph. And that was the end of it. They didn't care about this life. They only wanted to make sure that they were sealed in some way for the next life.
Well, I think at that point they understood the power, the sealing power, and how important it was.
They did.
It's
Yeah.
just the application of it was.
Yeah, and it.
They struggled with.
Yeah, and you know, Joseph didn't get all the answers at once on almost nothing. He had to, you know, make his way, and when he got too far off the track, why, he'd get pulled back by some communication from on high. And yeah, you know,
I didn't realize that those sealings went that far.
yeah,
Without a marriage to accompany him.
yeah.
So they just went out.
Yeah, there was a window of time when they were doing that.
Yeah, they would just, I'm sure they would just take them to the temple and go through the sealing.
So when we talk about Brigham Young with his 56 wives or whatever it was.
Oh, probably half of them were
Just sealed.
Just sealings, yeah.
Yeah,
And his marriage to Anna Eliza Webb probably made up for 50 of them.
so Vera's polio at 5, and they're caring for her, and takes a lot of care, and really a miracle that she was able to even survive.
It was, yeah, it really was.
Is that the purpose of the iron lung? They sort of get them to a point where the body stabilizes and can.
It was a substitute. I don't think in most cases that the lungs ever recovered the function. It was just living, you know.
Yeah,
it was just
surviving.
It was just existence. And
did she go into the iron lung? She have an iron lung?
No, she never had to. No. It affected her leg quite dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the most serious effect. And the irony is that President Budge had, I believe it was a granddaughter who also had polio, but she spent most of her life in an iron lung. It just wasn't in the cards for her, you know, in the great plan.
So with that physical handicap, she probably had more time to read and develop her mind.
Yeah, and she talked a lot about the ridicule, that, you know, just the jokes, and that all her classmates would kind of get to her, and she was not terribly gregarious, so she didn't really fit in too well. Although clearly by the end of high school, she was quite popular. She was a reporter for the school newspaper, and she was involved in quite a few of the activities. And she had quite a few friends. So
she was an assistant or secretary for the principal of the school too.
Yeah, yeah. But her mother had to go to the library and say, don't you check out any more books to my daughter. And she said she's going to ruin her eyes. and mother believed that her whole life, that if she did too much reading, she'd ruin her eyes. But I don't think she ever had more than one pair of glasses for the last 50 years of her life. I really don't think she ever had a prescription change.
Speaking of the ridicule thing, they looked at polio or somebody that drug us or had a handicap or something like that. They referred to them as cripples. And you know, to see how they did that or how pervasive that was,
Yeah.
is that we invited, after I got acquainted while I was at State Privacy, better with Dick Stratford, and he was president of the Los Angeles Temple, so I invited him up to come up and speak to the state.
I think I remember when he came out.
Which he did. And then just as he was launched against us, talking about the family and whatnot, like he mentioned Grandma, and he referred to her as a cripple.
He did that also at Dad's funeral, and I kind of came in on to hear the conversation when he was talking about this cripple, and I thought, well, who in the world is he talking about?
Yeah.
And it finally dawned on me he was talking about Mother. And I said, that's the first time in my life that I ever heard the word cripple associated with Mother.
You never thought of her that way.
Yeah.
Never.
Absolutely never.
Never.
And I had the same impression that I was shocked when I heard that, and I thought, you know, that's putting a tag on her that.
Well, I think the term was probably not meant as harshly as it might be today. It's like
Probably not.
developmentally disabled kids, what we'd call today, they'd call them idiotic on the census.
Oh yeah, they
Idiots.
Yeah, right.
And it was, you know,
they were idiots and bastards, and
Yeah,
reality is reality,
Right.
and there it went, you know.
But that carries a real connotation.
it does.
to
It carries a connotation.
And
But I don't think it was as, maybe it was, but
I-
maybe
no,
it wasn't
he-
as
he-
mean-spirited, especially from a brother like that.
Oh yeah,
No.
he had no feeling of that. He had an unbounded respect for what Mother had
Yeah.
accomplished.
it was just.
It was just the culture.
Well, you know what? That's amazing because you never thought of her as having a bad leg, really, or being.
No,
A
it was
handicap.
just no.
She
No,
carried her weight, and
She more than carried her weight, you know.
But I can see her going through a young life, you know,
with a tag like that.
and yeah, being referred to as a cripple, how that would cut pretty deep, and she's very sensitive to that, and was always very self-conscious about it.
You know, there's a lot of people we know that have had polio that we don't think of as, we don't even think
Yeah.
with that polio tag. So she went on her mission when she was, how old?
She
21?
was 21. That was the age in those, you know.
Up till
that was
just
the age
recently.
Up until just recently. And she went to Southern California. And
Did sisters serve for 3 years at that time?
no, she served for 2 years. I think it was 2 full years. I don't know when the year and a half came in for the sisters, but in her day it was 2 years. And they had a number of sisters in the mission, so it was not
Not
unique.
an uncommon thing. But
Yeah.
what about her family? Was I mean, I guess they were well enough to be able to support her on her mission.
Yeah, that doesn't appear to be any kind of a problem. In fact, her mother was so concerned about her that the first winter she came down and spent a considerable period of time down just being,
Oh, did she?
just to be near mother. And, so she was the protective mother hen, as most mothers are.
That was Roselfa.
Roselfa, yeah.
And then she gets off her mission. At what point does she meet her husband to be?
Well, Dad got off his mission in 23 or 22. 20 to 22 was Dad's mission. And he came back to the farm and was almost immediately put into the bishopric. It was the next year, in 23. He was put in the bishopric. And he worked on the farm.
And that's up to Star Valley.
In Star Valley. And then he got really restless and said, I gotta find a companion. And I guess he didn't see any possibilities in Star Valley, so he prayed about what to do, and he said, I've been to Idaho Falls, and he says, I think I'll just go try things out in Pocatello. And so he shows up in Pocatello, and he knows nobody, and he goes to a sacrament meeting, and Mother was the speaker. and he was impressed, and then I think he had a date to something there, because he was seriously looking, and it fell through, and he really wanted to go. So somehow he found out where the Stratfords were, and he went up and knocked on the door and said, I'd like to speak to that girl that spoke in sacrament with us. He didn't even know her name. So you can kind of imagine what kind of a response that would normally elicit, but she agreed, and so they went, and that started their
That was the start of their romance.
courtship.
Huh?
Yeah. And then Dad talks about how, as the relationship got more serious, he started having these, what he called voices in his mind that just kept beating on him to say, you don't want anything to do with her. She's whatever, and it really bothered him. It really bothered him. And I don't remember the exact circumstances of how they stopped, but he kept praying that he'd find an answer, to why he was having all that. And one day he was walking down the street, and I guess he was walking past the furniture store, and Jesse came out and waved to him, and they stopped and had a conversation. And somewhere in that conversation it came to Dad that all these voices were from the wrong side, and they stopped kind of at that point.
And Jesse was totally behind the relationship with Dad.
Yeah, I'm sure he thought, well, this is a hayseed farm boy. I've spent my whole life trying to get some culture into my family.
But he was concerned in her condition that she
Yeah.
may not find somebody.
She probably hadn't had many suitors, had she?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so. In fact, you've heard about her mission experience of speaking in tongues.
Yes.
That was, I'm sure, meant for her to give her some confidence that she could indeed have a family.
Yeah, I think she was quite a woman to raise a family like she did, and one daughter, and the rest of them were sons,
Yeah.
in a tent part of the year
Yeah.
at times, with a tremendously inventive husband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one who didn't put creature comforts on a very high scale.
You know, it was kind of a different lifestyle for her, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And when grandfather Stratford died in 1951, mother got a fairly significant portion of the estate, and Dad wanted that to buy a new tractor. And Mother said, "Not on your life." And she wouldn't even put it in their bank account. She set up an independent bank account in Idaho Falls.
So he couldn't spend it.
Yeah, because she was going to have a bathroom, come hell or high water.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew she had something, but I didn't.
Yeah, Mother told that to Susan.
Yeah.
Well, that would have probably been bringing indoor plumbing into the house.
Yeah. So it was a fairly major operation to the house, but fortunately they had a room that was a bathroom. It just didn't have any plumbing. But the bathtub, as I recall, fit very nicely
Yeah.
on the side wall. And
What did you do for baths before that? Go out and stand in the creek?
no, you had one of these wash tubs, literally. Literally.
You had a stove with a water reservoir on the side. You ever seen those? So it'd heat the water, and then just have a bathtub and go in and set it next to the stove in the winter.
Yeah.
Take and have a bath.
Not much
And
privacy.
no, and you'd
No.
use the minimum amount of water you possibly could get by with because it had to go a
You
lot
had to
more.
heat it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a matter of going in and shutting the kitchen door. That was it.
Well, they would have been affected by it more than me because we got the bathroom, I don't know, it was probably within a year or so of grandfather's
Yeah, I was
death.
thinking he died in 1951.
Yeah, so by 1953, when I was in high school, it's probably about the time we got the bathroom. But you know, that's interesting. I don't have any distinctive memory of before and after. I mean, you know.
Well, I guess it wasn't that big a deal to you.
It wasn't. It really wasn't a big deal.
I remember I was on my mission 50 to 52, and I think when I got home on this, I think it was pretty well completed, or else at least get started or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Now, didn't you work on new cabinets for the kitchen?
Yeah, I made those cabinets.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
When you
And that
when you
was
were home from
probably
your mission?
after that, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, that was after I got back from my mission.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was.
Probably would have been. Oh yeah, I've got another thing. We got
Yeah,
Okay.
on here.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that because I stayed home. I didn't go to school for a couple of years before I went on my mission. So I think it was during that time that I may have done it. Just before
Oh,
I
so
went
it
on
was
my
before,
mission. Yeah,
before the mission.
I
Okay.
think so.
What did you use for a saw?
Well, Grandpa had he had some logs that he had sawed up down the mill.
This is Grandpa Humphreys.
Grandpa Humphreys, and he brought those back and stacked them. You remember the old green shed out there we put a lean-to on?
Yeah.
Well, we put them in that lean-to, and I just used those boards. You know, some of them were really rough, and I had to split a lot of them. I really had to work with the boards to make them all fit. You know. And I just had a handsaw. And I did have, I think I borrowed Ray's saw. I think there was a table saw that I used or something.
Okay.
And I got that from Ray.
Because
found that
I
from
don't
Ray,
ever I don't ever remember those cabinet doors being, you know, rough hewn and full of cracks and everything. I thought they were really well done.
Yeah, well, I glued them together. Yeah, that's what I did. Is I got. In fact, I had to have a saw to do that, where I put a, run a saw down the face of the board and down the side of the board, and then put a little strip in and do the same on the other side, and then you glue those together, and they fit just like a glove. Yeah.
You're kind of self-taught at that too, right?
So, oh yeah.
Had to have been.
Yeah. So, but I enjoyed doing that, and I really enjoyed that. You know, it was a long project to do it. Had to knock the cupboards down that were in there on the one side of the wall, and had to put them along the outside wall there. It never did have cupboards, so
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, it took quite a while.
Is that house still standing?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was extensively remodeled by Jerry
Yeah.
after he bought the farm. It's a pretty nice home.
Well, let's tell me what you had. You had a thought a moment ago.
Yeah, I did. Right. I think this was after the war, but there was no money for Christmas, and so Keith and DeVerl made from scratch out of old orange crates 2 trucks, good sized trucks. Mine was a tractor trailer, and Harold's was a Ford, just a Ford truck. And these guys, they were perfect replicas. I think mine was a GMC truck. And one of the complete regrets of my life is I have no idea what I'm sure we just used those things to the point of.
They're ones that you could sit in.
No, they
or
weren't
you just
that
pull
big.
around.
Yeah, you just pull around and play with. But
Pretty good of them.
They were such. I recognized that the grill on the Ford that was made out of matchsticks. I could recognize that. But the wheels were perfectly round, as near as I can remember, and they were painted black, and they even had tread. They notched the tires so there'd be sort of a tread in them. They were really impressive. And
Pretty good.
We don't have a picture of them. I don't think they ever showed up in any.
You remember making those?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a lot of fun. We did that. We had what we called a junk room upstairs, every time we had an extra piece of something, you threw it in there. So we went up and we converted that to kind of a workshop. And we'd be up there at nights working. But that was a lot of fun. That was during the war when there was actually nothing that you could buy.
Yeah, I guess it must have been during the war because we were probably beyond that stage by the end of the war.
Yeah.
But those were really something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I about forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that funny? You don't even have a picture of those. But you do have a good memory of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you remember, just kind of in a nutshell, about your mother and how she lived her life? If you could sum it up in a couple of sentences, how would you describe her?
Well, she was first and foremost, she was a mother in the real sense of the word, and in a sense of complete sacrifice of anything and everything for her family. You know, personal creature comforts was a notion that somehow crept into our society way after her time, because she never had any notion about that. It was
Family first.
Sacrifice for family first. Yeah. And that pretty much guided her life. And she had to. And she was very willing. She very willingly took up that life of isolation for a woman out in the forest. I mean, I'm sure some of the neighbors just thought, this is the craziest family we've ever seen.
How would you describe her?
Oh, I think much the same way. You know, she had a very fixed set on the work ethic on the family. It seemed that both expected the family to work and pull their share. And one of the things that Phil mentioned, and we were taught by Dad that our work was outside, out in the fields and whatnot. And so that left the load on Mother and the fawn for the house. I know Phil mentioned, I says, I wish your mom had done some training with you on the chores to be done inside the house, But we did, by and large, why we lived that thing. We worked outside and tried to do what we could.
They were both pretty strong-willed people.
Yeah.
I don't think one dominated the other one, really.
No, they did. They thrash out the differences.
Yeah. And Mother was she was a good leader. In fact, I think she was really sighted president more than she wasn't,
Yeah.
And she had long periods where she was really sighted president, and she had a lot of responsibility on that because in those days, they had to provide the social end of things. It was a death, they were called right to the forefront of that, and so there was a lot of that going on.
She was always faithful.
Oh yeah, she was always faithful.
Oh
to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
She was.
Yeah.
So the one thing I could say is that neither she nor Dad ever faltered in the slightest in her testimony in the church. I mean, it was true, and it was just a matter of fact. And when the church had the first fall, yeah, I remember the times when when there was work to be done out in the field, haying or something, and there was a church activity that we had to be to. And they saw that we were there. And that took precedence over the work in the field.
I remember having to be at some scout activity or something. And I think it may well have been the only time in her life that Mother drove the car. She drove me to the activity. I guess it was in town. I don't remember where it was. That was something, I'll tell you.
I bet it was. I remember she was in training for that driving for a while. She never did quite catch the knack of it, you know.
Well, operating the clutch was very difficult for her. That was probably the biggest single issue that she had, other than just the pure fact that she was so short that she just didn't fit the mold of the typical driver. So I guess if she'd have had a pillow that was there that would prop her up probably 5 or 6. But then she'd never
Couldn't reach the pedals.
reach the pedals. So Detroit didn't have her in mind. Designed their automobiles.
Great woman, great heritage. Well, thank you for that. We went an hour.
Did we?
Yeah, and 1 minute.
So how many